So look at Anthony Ryder from South Lyon, Michigan, recently selected as the Lions 2020 Fan of the Year. He has a passion about sports broadcasting.
With the 112th selection in the 2021 NFL Draft, the Detroit Lions select Amon-Ra St. Brown, wide receiver, USC. One pride, baby! Yeah! The 2023 season is officially over. The Detroit Lions finished the year 12-5, and for the first time in franchise history, were able to win the NFC North. The Detroit Lions won the division for the first time since 1993 and will host their very first game at Ford Field in franchise history. However, despite the immaculate season by the Detroit Lions, despite finishing the year on a high note with a 10-point victory over a division rival, there's a growing sense among Detroit Lions fans that they may have made a mistake. Now, the Detroit Lions going into this game were pretty slotted in at the 3 seed. There was a mathematical chance that they could improve to the number 2 seed in the NFC, but that would require both Dallas losing to the Washington Commanders as well as the Philadelphia Eagles losing to the New York Giants. The odds were very slim, but they were not impossible, and with the odds of the 2 seed potentially still on the line, Dan Campbell made a call and said that the Detroit Lions were going to play their starters, they were going to play to win, and they were going to give everything they had and win every single game they possibly could. Now, this was heavily debated amongst Lions fans, as a lot of people felt like there was a very slim chance that the Detroit Lions would improve their seeding, and there was a much higher risk of injury that we were going to lose a major contributor 1 week before a major playoff game. And unfortunately, that ended up coming true, as the Detroit Lions suffered a number of injuries in that game, but one stood out above the rest as sensational rookie tight end Sam Laporta, after breaking the NFL's rookie tight end reception record, went down with a knee injury in the second quarter. Now, Sam Laporta did walk off the field and was brought into the blue tent. He was originally made questionable to return to the game, but a few minutes later, after being carted back to the locker room, he was officially ruled out, and many people assumed the worst. There was everything from Sam Laporta tore his ACL and will affect his 2024 regular season, all the way up to it's a minor hyperextension and he could potentially be ready to go for the very next playoff game. A couple hours after the game, the Detroit Lions did an MRI, and it turned out that Sam Laporta did hyperextend his knee, as well as having a bone bruise on his kneecap. He will potentially miss several weeks. However, there is no possibility, unless obviously something more severe happens, that Sam Laporta will miss any time throughout training camp of 2024 or the regular season. So the Detroit Lions dodged a little bit of a bullet, but they also likely lost their star tight end for the remainder of the 2023 season, and likely for the entirety of the playoffs. There's potential that if the Lions do go on an improbable run and they make it to, say, the NFC Championship game or potentially the Super Bowl, that Sam Laporta could return for those games, but those things are much easier said than done. And after losing your star weapon, it's much more difficult and I think less likely than it was a couple days prior. Now, did the Detroit Lions make a mistake in playing Sam Laporta? Did they make a mistake putting Jared Goff and Amon-Ra St. Brown and Penei Sewell in harm's way with a team that I wouldn't say was playing dirty? I wouldn't say was playing to injure players, but it did seem like there was a higher risk of injury in that game, as 4 or 5 different Detroit Lions left the game at some point, including star players like Amon-Ra St. Brown, including Brian Branch, of course, including Sam Laporta and Khalif Raymond, all who went down with injuries and missed time during that game. Was it the right decision for the Detroit Lions to try to win this football game and try to potentially put their players in a position where they could be impactful, but also could sustain season-ending injuries so late into the season and so close to crucial up-and-coming playoff games? I don't think the Lions made a mistake. There's a lot of people that are going to say it was pointless. There was very little chance that both of the Eagles and the Cowboys were going to lose. But at the same time, the Eagles did lose. So the Detroit Lions were essentially one game away from clinching that 2 seed. And if the Cowboys were upset, if the Cowboys, saw that the Eagles lost and they took their foot off the gas and they let Washington back into the game and Washington was able to fight their way back and win that game, the Detroit Lions are one game away from being the 2 seed. And without that Cowboys loss in the final play of the game, essentially, they're one game away from the 1 seed in the NFC. They were an incredibly good football team this year. They played really well. They went 6-2 at home. They went 12-5 overall. They were a great football team. And I don't think that they were a team that could afford to necessarily sit their starters. I know that Philadelphia benched their guys after they knew they couldn't win versus New York. I know that the Ravens benched players. I know that the 49ers benched some players. I know that even the Rams, who were playing in wild card weekend on the road, benched Matthew Stafford because they had already clinched a playoff spot and there was nothing else that they could earn. But that's not what the Lions case was. It wasn't a case of the Detroit Lions had nothing else to earn. It wasn't a case that the Detroit Lions couldn't improve their seeding, couldn't become the 2 seed, because those things were possible and those things very nearly happened for the Detroit Lions. So I don't think it was necessarily a bad move for the Detroit Lions to play Jared Goff. I don't think it was a bad move for them to play Amon-Ra St. Brown. I don't think it was a bad move for them to play Sam Laporta and Penei Sewell and Jahmyr Gibbs and all of these players that have helped you be successful, because that is the brand of football the Detroit Lions play. They are going to play to win every single football game that they possibly can, and that is on brand with what the Detroit Lions have done throughout the entirety of the Dan Campbell era. That's what they did at the end of his first season when they won their way out of the second overall or the first overall pick. That's what they did when they were at 1-6 2 years ago, and they went on an 8-2 run and very nearly made the playoffs a season ago. And this year, it is no different. You win every single game that you will play. You play to win every single possible game. And yeah, there is some risk that guys like Sam Laporta are going to miss a little bit of time, but those things could happen at practice. Those things could happen in the first play of the playoff game. You can't play scared in the NFL. And if you have something to earn, you have to work and try to play and earn it. So that is kind of where I stand with the mistake, I guess, is where people are calling it, of Sam Laporta getting hurt and Amon-Ra St. Brown being banged up and Brian Branch missing a little bit of time. I don't think it was a mistake. I honestly think it was the right call to not be rusty going into the playoffs, to make sure that you're as efficient, as in rhythm as possible, and honestly keep the ball rolling. Because if you stop it for a week, it's a lot harder to start rolling again than if you just roll all the way through the playoffs and you're already in rhythm, you're already working on stuff, and you don't take a week of game action off, because that is a big downgrade and that's a big downside for a lot of teams. That was why a couple of years ago, the number 1 seeded Baltimore Ravens looked flat in the playoffs, because they took that week 18 game off and then they had a bye week. They hadn't played games in 2 weeks and they came out incredibly flat. And I think that's what Dan Campbell was trying to avoid. And hopefully that is what the Lions are able to avoid this time around. Now, taking a look at this final game of the NFL regular season for the Detroit Lions, it was not a bad game. The Detroit Lions went into halftime with a 13-6 lead, and in the second half, they outscored the Vikings 17-14. They ended up winning by 10 points on the day with a 30-20 victory over the division rival Minnesota Vikings. And despite giving up a lot of passing yards, despite giving up a ton of yards through the air to Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison, the Detroit Lions only allowed 20 points on the day. They played a very tough brand of bend, don't break football. And even though they allowed a 3rd and 30 conversion, even though they allowed a number of 3rd and long conversions, at the end of the day, they gave up 20 points. And when you give up 20 points in the NFL, you're probably going to win the game. Now, starting off with the offensive side of the ball, the Detroit Lions quarterback Jared Goff was 23 of 32, 320 passing yards, and 2 passing touchdowns. He was sacked 1 time for a 9-yard loss, but finished the NFL season as the second leading passing yard quarterback. He was only behind Tua Tagovailoa, and I believe finished with 4,517 passing yards on the year, as well as having 30 plus passing touchdowns on the season, being the second quarterback in franchise history to ever do so. David Montgomery needed just, I believe, 28 yards to reach 1,000 on the season and was able to do that on 10 carries. Obviously, I think the Detroit Lions kind of were more looking at the passing game today or yesterday. David Montgomery only got 10 carries. Jahmyr Gibbs, I think for the first time in his career when both players were healthy, actually out-carried David Montgomery, but only had 13 carries for 30 yards. Both running backs able to find the end zone, however. Amon-Ra St. Brown had a great day, having 7 receptions for 144 yards and 1 touchdown with a long of 70 on 10 targets. Cleve Raymond, I thought, had a good day. He was tremendous at kick and punt returner, had 2 receptions for 50 yards and very nearly scored himself. Josh Reynolds got his bonus, needed 37 yards, I believe, in this game to get his bonus. The Lions on the last 4 plays of the game ran screen passes to Josh Reynolds to get him those yards. Sam Laporta had 5 receptions in a quarter and a half before he got hurt. Donovan Peoples-Jones had 2 receptions and 25 yards, including a 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1 conversion for a big play. James Mitchell had a 24-yard reception. Dan Skipper had a 4-yard reception. And the Detroit Lions offense, especially through the passing game, rolled for most of the day. The running game wasn't incredible, but the pass game more than made up for it. Jet Campbell led the team in tackles with 12 total tackles, a sack, and a tackle for loss. Alex Anzalone had 9 tackles. Cam Sutton had 9 tackles. Ifeatu Melifonwu, despite playing a more limited role, had 5 tackles on the day. Aiden Hutchinson had 2 sacks for 3 tackles for loss. Josh Paschal had a tackle for loss. Levi Onwuzurike got his 2nd career sack as well as a tackle for loss. And on the day, the Lions had 4 sacks, 6 TFLs, 2 interceptions, took the ball away twice, and were pretty good at doing that. Cam Sutton got his first career interception with the Detroit Lions, as did CJ Gardner-Johnson in his first game returning to the Detroit Lions safety. He was able to grab himself a pick to end the year. Craig Reynolds was okay on kick return, and Cleve Raymond had quite a few good punt returns, 4 returns for 80 yards. Michael Badgley wasn't perfect on the day, but was perfect from field goals and 3 of 4 on extra points. That 4th extra point was blocked, and Jack Fox had a pretty good day himself. 5 punts, 268 yards, 2 touchbacks, 2 inside the 20 with a long of 61. Offensively, the Lions were pretty good. Defensively, again, they played a very bend, don't break style of defense. They were able to give up a lot of yards, but at the end of the day, didn't give up very many points and got off the field on crucial 3rd downs more times than not. So at the end of the day, I consider that a pretty good defensive performance. Nick Mullins was, I thought, actually really good. 30 of 44 for 396 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, but 2 late interceptions on back-to-back drives to kill the Vikings. Ty Chandler had a great day, 12 carries for 69 yards, while Alexander Madison went 7 for 24. Nick Mullins had 2 for 8, and Justin Jefferson had 1 carry for negative 12 yards with a major tackle for loss made by Aiden Hutchinson. Justin Jefferson, like every wide receiver one has done this year to the Lions, had a great day, 12 receptions, 192 yards, and a touchdown over the top on 14 targets. Jordan Addison had a big play, 4 for 57 and a touchdown through the air. Other than that, they weren't all that dangerous, I didn't think. I felt like obviously Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison were super dangerous. But other than that, I thought the Detroit Lions were able to play pretty good defensively, and I thought they were great. 4 sacks and 2 turnovers will win you quite a few football games. On defense, nothing too impressive from the Minnesota Vikings. I don't believe they had a takeaway, no interceptions, no fumble recoveries. They did have 1 sack, and that sack was gotten by Danielle Hunter, I believe, to get a sack bonus on the season for him. But other than that, the Detroit Lions played really well. They finished 12-5 on the season with the tying for the most wins in a single season in franchise history. They're the number 3 seed, and they will officially be hosting the LA Rams in this upcoming week in the NFC wild card round. So with all that being said, we are going to talk about that playoff game a lot over the next week, but today we are recapping and kind of ending off the 2023 regular season. Your Detroit Lions are 12-5, the NFC North champions, the number 3 seed in the NFC, and they are looking hot going into the playoffs. So with all that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Let me know down in the comments below. Do you think it was a mistake to play Sam Laporta? Do you think some players should have got benched either for the entire game or potentially in the second half? I'd be very curious what you guys have to say and what you guys think about it. But with all of that being said, that's all I got for you guys right now. Thank you all so very much for watching. And until next time, and as always, go Lions.